My game of the day from round 3 of the Tata Steel tournament is Jan Nepomniachtchi against Vladimir Kramnik. Before I get on with the game, remember, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, then do click on the subscribe button and click on the bell for instant notifications for when we post a new video. Okay, the game. Jan played e4. Very hard to know what to play against Kramnik because he has a reputation as being incredibly well prepared. One of the best prepared professionals among the top players. So for that reason, it might appear a little strange that Nepo goes into a Spanish and allows the Berlin. But he has a little idea in mind. Let's see what happens. Now, instead of playing into the endgame with d4, Nepo plays rook e1 and knight e5, which is of course one of the main lines. So take care, threats on the e-file, and bishop e7. Now the bishop is attacked, and instead of playing bishop d3, which is the old move, which sort of, well, in the old days it used to generate some attacking chances, but I'm afraid these big guys know exactly how to defend against that. So the modern continuation is to play bishop f1, just to tuck the bishop out of the way and prepare to play d4. So the knight on e5 gets exchanged and castles. Now, the pawn structures are symmetrical, of course, and with one open file, that means that if black can develop successfully and trade pieces, well, should be just dead level. But it's this knight on d6, which is just a little bit problematic for black. Now, at the elite level, they know how to deal with this. But actually, I think at lower levels, this is a very practical choice for white to play against black, because white always has a little something here, and black has to solve a few problems before actually completely equalizing the game. And here, well, Kramnik played rook e8, exchanging rooks. Carlsen Aronian from Norway Chess 2018, you might recall that, went knight f5 and then d5, and Carlsen won a very nice game against Aronian, won quite quickly. Now, just watch out for this move d5. So the idea is obviously to gain space and preventing black putting the pawn on d5, which, well, is really, completely symmetrical, and it gives black space. But this seems to be the trend at the moment, to put this pawn on d5, as we'll see. Kramnik played rook e8. Now, Caruana against Anand from Paris last year went rook takes and then d5. Okay, another example of this d5 move. And in this game, after c3, rooks are exchanged. And now knight e8. Knight f5 was played in Steinitz Zuckertort 1886. But Kramnik went knight e8 to make room for the d-pawn. And now Nepo played d5 instantly. So this was his little idea that he'd prepared. It has been seen before, but it's a very rare move. But as I said, this idea of putting the pawn on d5 is very much the modern trend. And it does give black a few problems to solve. For example, if black plays the natural move d6, then the knight on e8 certainly doesn't look very good when it's blocked in. It's got to come out usually via g7, potentially after c6 and knight c7 there. But, it's a little bit problematic. Kramnik played b6. Bishop came to f4 and bishop b7. Attacking the d-pawn, queen d2. h6 can be a useful move, sometimes just to exchange bishops in some cases, but in any case it's nice to solve the back rank problem. And c4. At the moment this bishop is locked in. And yeah, I mean, d6 doesn't make a lot of sense here. Then it's going to be, with the pawn on h6, very difficult to bring the knight into play. Therefore c6 by Kramnik, and this is very logical because the knight at some point is going to come out via c7. So knight c3. Now if white had an extra move here and had a chance to put the rook on d1, for example, then white has a pretty healthy position. But black is just in time to exchange on d5. The move white wants to play is knight takes. Pawn takes was played in the game. White would like to play knight takes d5 to establish control with a piece over this beautiful central square. But bishop takes knight is the problem. And again, we want to recapture with the piece. But then bishop takes pawn, obviously wins a pawn, and that's no difficulty for black. And if pawn takes, well, this isn't so good. Then black can exchange bishops. This is nice continuation. Keep exchanging. Queen g5. And in this situation, well, black doesn't have any difficulties. The bishop certainly is not superior to the knight. That knight might hop out here. The king can come to the middle. I mean, the pawn doesn't stand very well on d5, actually blocking in the bishop. Black is absolutely fine in that position. Could even be better if black gets the king to the middle very quickly and starts to pressurize the pawn on d5. So this is the problem. So Kramnik is just in time. Knight takes, not very good. So Nepo had to play pawn takes pawn. And then I think black's position has basically, it's okay, it's stabilized. The knight has come off the back rank. There's a little bit of pressure here. White obviously still has a little bit of space. Bishop c4 defends that pawn again. But things aren't too bad for black. Queen d7 I think is possible here. I mean, that's the obvious move, but I suspect that Kramnik was reluctant to get involved with lines after knight e4. You don't really want to drop the bishop back to e7, that's a bit passive. And these lines after bishop e5 are quite tricky. Now my computer says that these lines are actually okay for black, but, well, at the board, would you be able to see your way through these complications after queen h6? It's a tricky move after this. Okay, I'm going to go through a long line here, but I'm sure Kramnik would have been examining this and maybe just kind of rejected it round about here. Who knows? The point is, actually, it's not so clear because that knight is trapped on d7. So in fact, white has to give up a piece after this move. And knight takes pawn and check. White has 3 pawns for the piece, but actually it's not really possible to play those pawns through, and black is okay here. It should be equal. So queen d7 is kind of the normal move, but I can understand why Kramnik would be reluctant to play it when knight e4 is very tricky, and I suspect that he saw something in those lines that he thought was rather dubious. So instead he played bishop takes knight, pawn takes, and then queen f6, which allows him to bring his queen off the back rank. So to some extent clears the position. The downside, of course, is that white has the 2 bishops now. So you could say a reasonably stable advantage, actually. Rook c8 by Kramnik. Looking to get some kind of pressure here, but rook e4 is a good move. And now white often has the chance to switch over to a kingside attack. Kramnik advancing on the queen side, trying to create counterplay, wants to push this bishop away, and he's still gunning for that pawn on d5. And yeah, there are some tricky moves here. I've already mentioned it might be possible to go for a kingside attack. Nepo said afterwards that he was actually looking at bishop e3, swinging around here, and it starts to get very tricky. Giving up this pawn, and white definitely has compensation here, with ideas of check and rook g4 attacking here. It looks like black is all right in this position, but it's very tricky. White's pieces are very active, and there aren't many defenders on the king side, it has to be said, but it seems that black is just about okay there. So Nepomniachtchi just held back for the moment with a3, just giving his bishop some room there to drop back after a4. Here, well, Kramnik was starting to run short of time, and 15 minutes to go till the time control. It's tricky, and he went on a bit of an adventure with his queen. Most sensible move is to play rook e8. Now white is still better in that endgame with the two bishops, but it shouldn't be too bad for black. And the alternative is to play rook d4, and that keeps more tension in the position, but obviously the rook on the open file at some moment will give black some counterplay. So rook e8 looks like the best move for black, but coming back here, Kramnik went on this adventure with the queen. And queen b1 check. I think it would be easy to be seduced by this continuation with the queen active and perhaps this pawn looking a little bit more vulnerable. And a tricky move like b4 coming in, making room for the knight, trying to get the rook into play. But Nepo dealt with this very well. First of all, he took. Now knight b5, it's getting absolutely critical. And this rook wants to come in. But Nepo had seen a good defense. Queen d3, so obviously knight takes rook, queen takes queen. Whoops, that's queen takes queen. It's possible to go into the endgame. It might be tenable for black, but instead queen a1. And well, it's tempting to play like this because it appears to maintain the pressure, but in fact after a couple of very careful moves, white simply has a big advantage here. Bishop takes pawn, so Kramnik gets a pawn back. If queen takes, then there's knight c3, but rook e1 is an excellent move, and suddenly threats are beginning to appear, and white's looking much better coordinated now. So we've got this knight on prise, this bishop on prise as well. After bishop c4, queen f5, excellent move, another attack. So the rook came to f8. So there's not really a better square. And now a fantastic move, and the kind of move which is so easy to overlook in time pressure. Nepo played king h2, and this reminds me of these Kasparov-Karpov games, these famous Spanish games where in the middle of the attack, Kasparov just tucked his king away on h2, and it avoids a counter-attacking check on the back rank. And the same applies here, so that white is now threatening bishop c2, and queen takes rook is no longer check, and of course queen h7 mate. And there's no decent defense now for black. For example, well, if this queen moves away, let's say queen c3, then rook e3, the rook is swinging across. All white pieces are joining in the attack here. Or let me go back again. That's the position on the board. If queen d4, bishop c2, threatening a mate. g6, the queen comes back. And now a threat of rook e4 with a kind of skewer here, and then bishop h6. And black's position is falling apart. You can see this knight is nowhere near the action. This bishop is loose. There are just too many weaknesses on the king side. So, for example, if d5, then bishop takes g6, this crashes through. This is crushing. So let's come back here. g6 played by Kramnik, but by this stage it really is lost. It's an ugly move. It weakens these dark squares. So now the queen has come back and is attacking the bishop and also attacking the pawn on h6. d5 played. The queen came into e7. Pawn takes pawn, and this was the final move of the game. Bishop e5 attacking the queen. And if the queen were to move, queen f6. With unstoppable mate on one of those squares. So in the end, that turned into an absolute rout, and Jan Nepomniachtchi leads the tournament after 3 rounds with 2.5. He's out there on his own. Still a long way to go, of course. In the next round, we have Mamedyarov with white against Nepo, and Carlsen has white against Kramnik. That's Kramnik's reward for losing this game. Remember, if you're not a subscriber, do click on the subscribe button, and if you want to support the channel, then do check out patreon.com, or if you want to support us on PayPal, again, check out the buttons, and they're there. You can do that. Thanks for watching.